New World. This is an MMO that seemingly everyone hated after its first week of release. But these days it stands as a bit of a testament to the idea behind let 'em cook. New World is a buy-to-play game with a single optional DLC, featuring weapon-swapping action combat with quite a massive world that operates on a seasonal release pattern. Back in 2021, this game was released to over 900,000 concurrent players on day one, within just 1 week seeing one of the sharpest, if not the sharpest decline in concurrent players in MMORPG history. I unfortunately did not get the chance to play New World on release. I first tried the game in late 2023, right around the release of the third season, or the Rise of the Angry Earth expansion. This was the expansion that increased the level cap from 60 to 65. It also added mounts, which at the time was quite the controversial decision, but I think looking back on it, we can all agree that mounts have been a great addition to the game. These days, New World is technically on its 9th season, though the duration of each season has been fairly different. For example, Season 4 lasted for about 111 days, but Season 5 was almost 200 days. Each season brings in new content to the game. Sometimes these seasons have been fairly low impact, and other times, like Season 6, we saw the release of New World Eternum. This completely changed the new player experience. It added support for consoles as well as crossplay, and even technically changed the entire name of the game from just New World to New World Eternum. These seasons also generally saw the typical ebbs and flows of player engagement, especially during release times. We'd see New World gain a surge of new and returning players, though nothing like its launch numbers. And at its lowest of lows, there was a time when New World was only averaging 3,000 concurrent players a day. But things seemed to be genuinely turning around, not only with the addition of console compatibility, but also just in general. People seem to be coming back to the game and more excited about it recently. What was once a game that was widely considered to have a completely lacking endgame without much content to delve into, I now felt completely overwhelmed trying to log back into my level 65 main character, as it's been almost 2 years since I last played. So I figured since they changed the new player experience and player counts seem to be on the rise with plenty of fresh new faces hopping into the world of Eternum, at least according to Steam charts and other player metrics, I thought that now would be a good time to make a brand new character and kinda just start over. I heard that the leveling experience has been accelerated and apparently they've added a bit of a class system. Kind of. You'll never be locked into a specific weapon or playstyle, but they added templates to help get you started. My original review of New World in 2023 left me completely stunned with one of the most satisfying level experiences and top-notch open-world immersion with beautiful graphics and even sound design. However, I do remember the somewhat stagnant endgame and feeling kinda disappointed once I reached the max level. Like I had somehow finished a single-player game and I wasn't really too compelled to keep playing. So I'm interested to see how that compares here and now in 2025. Let's jump into it. Someone's calling?
Snake, do you copy?
We've received urgent intel. Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater is now available. What? That's right, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, the sponsor of today's video. This is a remake of the beloved Metal Gear Solid 3 from 2004. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest here, I never personally tried any of the classic Metal Gear games, so this was literally my first introduction to the series. From what I can tell, they've remained completely faithful to the original, just with a fresh new coat of Unreal Engine 5. And my goodness, what a completely heart-wrenching, thrilling stealth mission experience. I can't even explain to you how long it felt like I was holding my breath while playing. It's easily one of the most adrenaline-pumping games I've played in quite some time. Now, for the old heads, you can play this game in the exact same manner that you used to remember, but users have full choice of which visual and camera style they want to play. And this remake features a new style, allowing for a new way to experience Metal Gear. So what are you waiting for? Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater is out now and available on PS5, Xbox, and Steam. Make sure to use my link in the top of the description or the pinned comment to get your hands on this classic remake now. Thanks again to Konami for sponsoring today's video. So, like I said, creating a new character. Now, the entire intro to the game has been changed, including even the cutscenes, which are fantastically done with amazing voice acting and visuals. It still features the same familiar characters, but the storyline and how your character appears has changed slightly. Now, like I mentioned, you have some starting archetypes to choose from, 7 to be exact, featuring a different combination of 2 weapons and a different style of armor. The last time I played New World, I went for a large 2-handed melee weapon as well as a range weapon, but this time around I thought it would be cool to try something entirely different. So I went for a bit of a caster type. There are two archetypes for caster, occultist as well as mystic. A mystic uses a healing staff and void gauntlet, where an occultist uses a fire staff and ice gauntlet. Since I wanted to be mostly a damage type of caster, I decided to go for the occultist archetype. The rest of the character creator remains relatively the same. I chose an eccentric wizard sort of appearance with a friar-esque bowl cut and a very wizardry sort of beard. I painted both of these bright red, and for some reason this character sort of reminded me of Barnacle Boy and Mermaid Man from SpongeBob. I don't know why, but that was just immediately what jumped into my head. Unfortunately, Barnacle Boy was already taken, but Mermaid Man, not taken. Imagine that. Imagine if I actually meet Barnacle Boy in-game. We could become the best of friends. In fact, I even looked up Barnacle Boy to see if I could send them a friend request, but all I found was this Barnacle Boy 671. I'm not sure if that's the Barnacle Boy who was stealing my name and the 3 numbers acted as some sort of account identification, but either way I sent them a friend request, and they were only level 9, so unfortunately I doubt they're even still playing. Anyway, Mermaid Man entered the world of Eternum, and this time around, instead of landing already on an island, you first learn the basic bits of combat while still on a flaming ship. New World is obviously action combat. A lot of people dislike action combat for some reason, and with the influx of seemingly every MMO trying to be action combat, I can kind of understand the fatigue. But with that being said, I still enjoy it. In New World, you have 2 weapons, which you can switch between, and each of them have 3 abilities, with generally slower cooldowns, making for a decent amount of build variety, but still a fairly simple action combat system that isn't overly busy. Eventually, you swim up on shore, and oh my god, swimming. For those of you who may be unaware, New World used to not have a swimming feature. Instead, your character would just death walk into the ocean and eventually die after being in the water for 20 seconds. This was weirdly one of the most commented on complaints from my original New World review, where everyone told me I was just being nitpicky for hating on the fact that the game didn't have an operational form of swimming. But hey, look at us now, swimming away. I think it's genuinely important, not only for immersion, but just for general navigation, especially in a game like New World where there is literally water all over the place throughout the entire map. So I'm already pretty impressed with some of the new features, and it's kind of hilarious they put this right at the beginning of the game. It's almost like they're acknowledging their mistake in a comical way, being like, hey returning players, look, we have swimming. Anyway, you return to shore and find the loot sack with some of your lost items, including your 2 starter weapons, as well as your headpiece. I gotta say, the occultist starting set actually looks pretty cool, and I was interested to see how this ice gauntlet worked. Each weapon levels up independently and gains 20 ability points that you can slot into a sort of talent tree to unlock new abilities and passive upgrades. The whole new starting area, or tutorial area, looks completely beautiful, showing off the game's graphics with highly saturated areas and cool looking enemies. I think the first impression of a game is so important, and with all these new console players who already have a pretty limited selection of MMOs to choose from, this will definitely help to set New World apart. Even culminating in this absolutely beautiful landscape shot once you reach the end of the tunnel, and New World Eternum splashes across your screen, and yeah, honestly, it's just really well done. Also, one thing I randomly noticed is that they changed the interface. It used to be your entire skill set and weapons would be featured in the bottom right corner of your screen, but now they're displayed in the center along the bottom of your screen. I wonder if this was done for console use or just aesthetic purposes, but either way, I think it looks a little bit better. Anyway, just like before, the tutorial ends in a boss fight against the corrupted Captain Thorpe. It's not very difficult, but it really introduces you to the basics of combat. Before you wake up on the shores of Monarch Bluffs, and from this point on, you're in the normal game world, and the story you might be used to if you've played New World before will now commence. Now, in my original review of New World back in 2023, progressing through the entire base main game storyline and getting all the way to level 60, not even 65, just 60, took me a total of 45 hours of gameplay. Admittedly, I took my time and went a bit slower during that playthrough, but considering this is my second go at it, as well as hearing some rumors about an increased leveling pace, I want to see if I can beat that time drastically. And wow, I didn't realize just how drastic it would be, but more on that later. Another one of my critiques from my original playthrough of New World was the copy-pasted feel within the game, and also a complete lack of mob diversity. Back then, there were basically 4 reskinned monsters that made up the majority of things you would be fighting in New World. And while there is definitely still a ton of ground to be made in this regard, especially in some of the base game areas, the newer areas and new tutorial, alongside a couple of graphical overhauls, has mostly fixed this. Many of the starting towns are still quite similar in appearance, and it can be jarring seeing many of the same assets over and over, though for some reason this time around it really didn't seem to have a major effect on my immersion. Maybe it's because I was already familiar with the world and knew what to expect, but overall it's such a small complaint in the grand scheme of things anyway. Now, the first 20 levels of my playthrough took I want to say maybe a couple of hours at max. New World has you absolutely flying through the early leveling experience, and honestly the entire leveling experience, but in the early game it genuinely feels like you're getting another level every few minutes. The nice thing about reaching level 20 is that you unlock the mount system. Now, one thing I really wish they would add is a certain amount of account-wide progression. There are systems such as transmogs or skins, but the vast majority of progression remains character locked. I'm generally okay with that, but mount skill level, please. Amazon Games Studio, please allow your riding level to be account-wide. It was awesome to get my wolf mount skin, which I could use right at level 20, but it was jarring just how slow this mount actually went, barely faster than if I was just normally sprinting on my character. This would be massive for leveling alts, as a ton of New World's progression is travel dependent, and actually getting your riding skill level up can be a bit of a pain in the ass. You basically have to travel around the world doing different time trials where you go from one location on the map to another, utilizing checkpoints along the way. These trials aren't necessarily difficult, but they are time consuming and fairly tedious, especially considering you'd have to redo these on every single character. Now, another thing that you might notice when starting New World is that your character just kinda sucks at doing damage, and also takes a ton of damage. This is probably why they decided to fast track the early leveling process so much. I noticed in the first couple of hours of gameplay that combat just kinda generally sucked, as you don't have the weapon skill levels to have all your abilities and passive upgrades. Sometime around level 25 and up, I noticed a pretty significant shift in not only how much I was enjoying the combat system, but also how easy it was to deal with mobs, especially large numbers of them. And speaking of which, one of my main complaints from New World was the mob collision effects. Basically, in New World, you can't pass through mobs if they're in your way. This was a huge pain point for me in the past. It felt like I was constantly getting stuck or trapped by large groups of mobs, and it was honestly really annoying to deal with. This time around, however, it seemed like a complete non-issue. This could be partially due to the fact that I was now playing a ranged-based character, whereas in my past playthrough, I was utilizing mostly melee. But it does seem like AGS has made some changes to the enemy AI where they don't crowd around you as much, especially in cornered areas. Eventually, around level 30, I made it to my first soul trial, the Curse of Care Done. I remember this being a significantly more challenging fight in my first playthrough. Even dying a couple of times. Maybe I was just awful back then, but I can't help but feel like they've nerfed it a bit, as I had literally no trouble at all. Like, I never even got close to taking enough damage to actually die. Now, one important thing to note here is they have removed group dungeons, or expeditions, from the main story quest. Apparently in an attempt to make the MSQ a bit more solo-friendly, so you don't get stuck waiting in queues to progress. This is both a pro and con in my books. First of all, I can imagine that waiting 30 minutes or more for some other people to be potentially leveling up at the same time as you, who need to access the same dungeon as you to continue forward with the MSQ, that would absolutely operate as a quit moment for a ton of players. Especially considering how far this MMO's average population has fallen sometimes in the past year or so. But on the other hand, I think it's really important to introduce players to group content, especially while they're still going through the leveling process, as this will place them with other similarly leveled players, and through this you can teach them how dungeons operate in your game, in a sort of newbie or learning environment. So what they've done now is replaced all of the previous dungeons with solo soul trials, all of which are a ton of fun to participate in, but it does unfortunately take a bit of the MMO feel out of the game at times. Also, wait. I literally didn't find out about this till just now. Apparently with the Eternum update, New World is now marketing itself as just an RPG. Man, what is happening? We have Dune coming out as an MMO, then switching to an RPG, which definitely is the right call, but New World came out as an MMO, and it's now calling itself an RPG, even though it's definitely 100% still an MMO. That's hilarious, I guess. These games don't even know what genre to call themselves. And speaking of the MMO element, throughout my leveling process, I was actually floored with just how active New World really seems. Whether that's just in towns, which are all relatively filled with players, but even while I was out questing in the wild, there was very few times that I didn't have a helping hand when going through the main story quest. Which is a huge bonus, especially when someone just cleared an area you needed to access, or if you're trying to take down a boss. Now, on my second or third day of replaying New World, I finally had a full day to myself. I logged in around level 27. Looking pretty cool if I do say so myself. The golden axe and armor I had found was fantastic. But I set myself a goal of seeing just how far I could progress in a single day. I had about 7 or 8 hours to play, so I thought if I got between level 45 to 50, I would be quite happy with that day's progress. And wow, I was not ready for just how fast this would go. Within about an hour, I was already level 30. Oh, and really quick, this is off topic, but do you guys ever get that sinking feeling in your gut when you jump off of high places in MMOs? Just me? I don't know. Comment and let me know. But a few hours after that, and I was already level 40. I fought a couple more bosses, continued through the story quest, made my way from area to area, finishing up in Eden Grove. I was level 51. And I'm not kidding you, by the end of the entire day, after about 7 hours of straight leveling, and after finishing a super cool soul trial in Ebonscale, I was level 57, meaning I had acquired 30 levels in one day. 30! Safe to say, I was quite proud of my efficiency, and the next day I logged on to finish the story and the ending boss fight. Now, in my last playthrough, the Tempest Heart mission was actually an expedition, or a group dungeon that you had to participate in. But this time around, it was just a soul trial, and the fight was honestly quite easy. However, the visuals and the scenery in the area were still completely amazing. I wrapped up the entire base game's main story around level 59, so not quite the level cap, but with a total of just 12 hours played on this character. Safe to say I definitely achieved my goal of completing this at a much faster pace than I did before. This time around, taking me 33 less hours. Now, this is because, obviously, throughout the years and updates, AGS has made changes to how much experience you get from quests, and obviously having a mount right from level 20 made a difference as well. On top of that, knowing and understanding the game and not needing to wait for queue times for dungeons, it all adds up to a much quicker leveling experience. Even with this faster leveling though, in my opinion, New World still has one of the best, most immersive storylines and worlds to level through. Obviously, once you reach level 60, you're not done either, especially if you've purchased the Rise of the Angry Earth DLC. There are a ton of other zones to go and quest through that have been added throughout the seasons. Some of these I still have to go back and do on my main character. And honestly, I was feeling pretty good about having decided to level a second character for this review. It really gave me the chance to delve into a lot of the new changes, and now that I have nearly 2 max level characters, I'm really excited to get back into playing New World regularly. Speaking of which, I wanted to hop on the main and get a quick idea for what the endgame is really looking like these days. Using a great axe as well as leveling a bow, my character currently did not have any of the weapons to max level. Admittedly, I remember trying so many different weapons in my last playthrough, trying to get a good feel for each of them. I also took a look at my trade skills, something I haven't touched on much in this video, as I don't think too much has generally changed since I last played. A goal of mine is definitely to max all these out, as I remember New World's gathering and crafting system being really fun and satisfying to interact with. Especially gathering, with hands down some of the genre's best sound design. Also, having 250 riding is a complete game changer. Look how much faster I go compared to my newer character. Please, AGS, make this account wide. Please. Anyway, in terms of endgame activities, you have a few different options ranging from PvP to solo PvE and of course group PvE. Despite not being much of a PvP guy myself, here's me trying some 3v3 arena in which I'm mostly just watching from the corner. But despite me not being much of a PvP-oriented player, it's definitely one of New World's biggest selling points. Featuring open world PvP, instance PvP such as this, there's a deathmatch, 20v20 arena, as well as a new capture the flag mode, which sounded kinda cool. Then, taking a look at PvE, you have 3 daily soul trials, which are some of those trials you would interact with in the main story quest. However, at level 65, these scale with your level, and like I said, there are 3 you can do every day, and these grant higher level rewards. I participated again in the Curse of Care Done, once again finding it extremely easy, and after completing your first solo soul trial, at level 65, you're given an artifact flail, which is the highest rarity of item. It is important to note that flails do require you owning the Rise of the Angry Earth DLC to actually use. Furthermore, you have normal expeditions and mutated expeditions that you can participate in daily. These are just your normal dungeons that you can group up for, with the mutated versions being only accessible to the max levels. On top of that, with the Eternum update, New World released their first true raid, with the Hive of Gorgons. This is definitely something I want to try soon, as I get working towards some best-in-slot gear. All in all, New World still doesn't have that fully robust and fleshed out endgame that you might be looking for in most MMOs. But there is still a ridiculous amount of content to sink your teeth into, especially if you enjoy a mix of PvP and PvE. However, I have to say that despite New World having quite a few rough patches since its launch, it definitely seems like things are finally on the right trajectory. Player counts just keep going up, especially with the addition of consoles, and also recently it was given to PlayStation Plus subscribers for free. I said in the beginning of the video that New World seems to be standing as a bit of a testament to the phrase, "let 'em cook." and tons of other people seem to agree. Probably because my first playthrough was in 2023, but I never really got the overblown hate for New World. In my opinion, it plays like a top-tier MMO. The graphics, immersion, story, combat, gearing system, crafting and gathering system, the player-owned housing, and general economy of the game all seem to be rated decent to great. The two biggest issues that are always cited when regarding cons for New World is obviously the slightly lacking endgame content and then balance issues within PvP. But for me personally, I'm still very optimistic about this game. I plan on sinking a ton more time into my two characters here, participating in all the content and shooting for some best in slot gear. And I couldn't be more excited to hop back on. So is New World worth picking up in 2025? Yes, even as a buy-to-play game, even if you don't really get into the endgame content, I think it's totally worth picking it up just to experience the world, the crafting, the story, the combat. It's genuinely just a well-done game. My answer in 2023 was that it's worth it, and now in 2025, I think it's even more worth it. My future hopes for this game are that once the Lord of the Ring MMO drops from AGS, they don't abandon New World, and they continue pushing to make this the best game it can be. We know that MMOs take a long time to flesh out. We have plenty of other examples of games that didn't really hit their stride until years later, like old school RuneScape, Final Fantasy XIV, and even Guild Wars 2. I think New World has what it takes, and things are looking up right now. Anyway, folks, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. Don't forget a like, a comment, a sub. Those things help a bunch, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider becoming a channel member. But I will catch you all in the next one. Later.